Chapter 9. Mistrust. Kai gently stroked the lock of hair in Nez's shaking hand, almost as though he was trying to summon a memory with his sense of touch. If this was his beloved trying to reach him from some great beyond, it seemed convincing, yet out of reach with his cynical outlook. Being trapped, coerced, or manipulated seemed to be Kai's main source of anguish when it came to new relationships with strangers. Being essentially on the run for years allowed him to gauge someone's personality, usually in the time it took to draw his sword from his belt. "This is yours. I'm to give it back to you. My orders, please take it," Nez said eagerly to Kai. "You'll forgive me if I don't trust someone like you. My parlour wouldn't trust you either." "She knew how to weigh up anyone's heart," Kai replied. He backed away from Nez and looked to Jilu. "I don't want this potential threat at our side. You cannot prove anything, and I truly believe he's not worthy of our company, lad," Kai pronounced frankly. Yet Jilu, still unsure of Nez, felt that more bloodshed in this valley would ultimately bring them bad luck. Jilu approached Nez, stood in silence during this entire discussion. "I want you to carefully explain your purpose here and your business following us all this way. Where did you come from, and explain who you know as Parla." Before Nez could answer, Kai interjected, "If you lie to me, I will kill you with my bare hands." With this ominous warning, Nez spoke. "I am from the foothills of the Vork Mountains, east of here. There are many camps there of refugees like me. We came from near the city of Well, all of us. I was too young to see the land being cleared. All I know is the Vork lands. We farm mainly animals that we can tame in the highlands. There are also mines and quarries that many of us work. My parents died in a fire, our hut burned to ash. The people there blamed me for starting the fire. They wanted to execute me by hanging me from a tree. Then one woman helped me escape from the cages near the camps. She was tall, with dark flowing hair. She had the most amazing eyes I ever looked into. Green tunnels that could penetrate your soul." Kai hated hearing this, more than seeing her die. He knew it was a lie. His shoulders were tense with anger. It wouldn't take much for him to lose his temper. Julie wanted to know where she originally sent him on his task. He knew nothing of the Vork area. His knowledge of the outside world let him down once again. Before Jilu could ask anything, Kai had enough of this. He advanced on Nez and pinned him to a tree. "I am sickened by this story now," shouted Kai into Nez's face, his sword drawn again and shoved against his throat. He grabbed the cord around Nez's waist and pulled it clean off, turned him to face the tree, bound his hands behind his back. "What are you doing, Kai?" asked a concerned Jilu, who worried for his state of mind. "If this Nez, if that is his real name, is telling the truth, then we should head for the Vork Hills. But I want to meet this mistress for myself." "But why the bonds?" said Jilu. "I don't trust anyone who claims to have contact with the dead, lad. That's the way of the order, and he will join us, but as our prisoner. I will have it no other way." Fearing that he would anger Kai even further, Jilu reluctantly agreed to his terms for this journey. With a bloodied and distressed Nez leading the way, Kai kept his sword drawn the whole time. He didn't want to be taken unaware by any unseen enemy. Kai had his reasons to be cautious. His entire order were hunted down by spies and traitors from within their own ranks. After a mile or so they climbed across the hills. Kai insisted that they stop for a moment. "I can't follow this shit-stained idiot anymore. My stomach is rebelling. Come here, Nez, you're getting a bath, you stinking bastard." Kai went ahead slightly and called them to follow him. They emerged into a clearing where their series of streams met into a pool. Actually quite a picturesque hollow surrounded by willow trees dipping their leaves gently into the burbling pools of water. Get in and leave your filthy clothes on the bank, Kai ordered Nez. Complying in complete silence, he stripped to his bare skin, and while still bound, he entered the chilly waters with a brief yelp. The cold, clear water quickly muddied with the detritus that clung to him. For half an hour or so they sat as Nez washed. All the while, Jilu fashioned another wooden spear from a broken branch he found by the pool. The dagger given to him by Kai was far more efficient both at stripping the bark and sharpening a point than the flint used before. The next time we make camp, lad, you should harden that point in the fire. A much more deadly weapon for you to wield, said Kai, who was actually impressed at Jilu's ingenuity. Please may I get out now? Requested a shivering Nez. Out, replied Kai with little patience. He had cut a hole in one of the tent skins and twisted some grass into a cord. Fit for a king, Kai chuckled sarcastically. Nez covered his groin in embarrassment, but quickly obliged and fitted his newly tailored rags to his soaked skin. Where are we going now? Jilu asked Kai. We're going to follow the course of the river Nub, lad. The Nub? Replied Jilu. That's beyond Old Panna, where I come from. I cannot go near that place again. Don't be worried, lad, replied Kai. We'll travel along the coast of the Lek. Down along the tributaries of the Santic, not using the main trunk of the river itself, to the northwest lay Canna, a place Kai clearly wanted to avoid at all costs. Even though it was close enough to the Khan territories, it seemed remarkably calm and peaceful. A lush land of plains and scattered woodlands. Small hills bobbed and sunk in the landscape, undulating meadows crisscrossed by trickling rivers. The skies were blue, the temperature very pleasant. Mile after mile they walked. Occasionally they came across old farmhouses, long since abandoned and in various states of decay. Jilu remembered Kai's explanation of the displacement of people living and farming here. This was first-hand evidence of this upheaval. They sat for a while after making such good progress across the countryside. Kai picked wild berries from a hedgerow, and Jilu was trusted to collect water. There was no rivers in the immediate area, so he settled for a pond instead. The pond looked man-made, perhaps a place to keep fish, or perhaps a watering hole for livestock. He came back to the temporary campsite and doled out water to Kai and Nez. Kai smelled the liquid and then quickly grabbed the canteen from Jilu's lips. He poured the water out onto the ground and threw the flasks away with all of his strength. Karmika, exclaimed Kai. That water came from no flowing river, did it that? Jilu pointed to where the pond was located and said, No, I found it over there by the old farm wall. That explains how they... Kai started but stopped mid-sentence as they looked at Nez. He was drinking the water. I fucking knew it, shouted Kai. I'll have no more of this. Kai punched Nez in the stomach, lifting his feet off the ground with such a forceful strike. Nez fell to his knees and immediately vomited. Jilu looked in horror as the vomit started to move. Maggots. More fucking maggots. He shouted, No more of this, please. He begged in desperation to the air. Is he going to die? I can't watch that again. Jilu asked Kai, thinking of the disgusting end of San. No, laddie, he didn't have it in his body for long enough, Kai said reassuringly. But I guarantee this piece of shit wouldn't have met the same fate as San, lad, said Kai, looking at Nez, who still knelt on the grass, coughing and spluttering. Kai dragged Nez by his hair towards a tree, with two limbs overhanging from its trunk. Picking up Nez's skinny frame, he looped his bound hands over the branch. Nez's feet didn't touch the ground. He dangled about a foot from the earth, his feet frantically kicking and letting out loud moans. Nez struggled to free himself from this natural gallows, his wrists bleeding heavily from the weight pulling on his stick-thin arms. Jilu's fear returned with all speed. Please, don't do this, Kai, he implored, but this time Kai was not to be swayed in his decision. Before any further protest could be made by Jilu, Kai held up his sword and in one powerful motion ran the blade through Nez's stomach. He took the hilt in both hands and twisted the sword in a spiral as Nez growled in pain. A visceral groan of spitting and gagging sounds emanated from his dying lips. Blood flowed down his chin from his mouth as he finally twitched his last. Kai kept moving the sword in and out of the substantial wound in a desperate effort to end this sad human's existence. The ground beneath Nez was now a scarlet pool of gore. Jilu vomited in sheer disgust at the brutal butchery he had just witnessed. Kai stood catching his breath, watching Nez's body slowly sway in the breeze, his sword still impaling him as he swung and the steel glinted in the sunlight. Nez's head slung low over his chest as the blood trickled down from his mouth. "You murderer! You're a fucking murdering bastard!" shouted Jilu. Kai made no protest to this charge brought to him. "Just fucking wait," Kai said in a rough staccato fashion. "Wait for what? You just killed someone in cold blood, and all I'm supposed to do is do as you ask? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to see now, apart from my only friend's guilt?" Jilu responded now, crying uncontrollably, partly out of fear of what Kai might do to him, but also that he might be right in the summary execution. Jilu walked away from the sight of death once again, sickened and traumatized. Fear ran through him like a raging torrent. He squatted down to try and compose himself, holding his head in his hands as tears ran through his fingers. Why had someone who seemed so wise and composed lower himself to that of a murderer? He dwelled in the abyss of frightened contemplation for several minutes, sighing deeply each time he opened his eyes, crying each time he closed them as he saw the images flash in his mind, images of cold-blooded savagery. What the fuck? He jumped suddenly. The sound that rattled the fabric of his being, a shuddering and chilling sensation echoed through his ears. A gurgling screech announced itself from the tree behind him, then a series of flapping, kicking thuds. Standing up, terrified of what he would see, he turned to witness the freshly slaughtered body of Nez kicking and flailing. His eyes open, but now blackened and piercing. The sword that stuck in his frame juddered and undulated violently in his stomach. Fresh blood pumped from the wound, although it was now no longer red. Brown stinking ooze bubbled from the wound, leaving the ground a gory quagmire. "I fucking knew it. I told you, lad," Kai shouted, laughing maniacally. "Another canned bastard, another one dead." He walked up to the twitching, writhing corpse that was Nez, or is Nez. He playfully twisted his sword in the belly wound again, bouncing his hand off the pommel as Nez screeched again and again. Jilu needed to know more. "All right," he sighed. "You have to explain this to me, Kai. I really can't take much more of this shit." "This piece of shit drank the water infused with the karmika fruit. It didn't affect him," Kai explained. "I saw his eyes dim as he drank with glee. He is a reaper, just like San was for you, lad." "Will he die like San?" Jilu asked. "No. This bastard will try and return to Sipa to join the rest of the failures and traitors. Well, that's what he wants to do." Kai looked at Jilu with a plotting smile. "We'll secure him to this tree and let him screech all he wants. That way he won't be joining the Khan's burning ranks any time soon." He cut off the cloak he made for Nez and left him hanging naked. Running his dagger up the length of the blood-stained skin, he made long thongs to bind him even further, tying his legs to an exposed root of the tree and tying his wrists even tighter. Nez was now stretched like a fresh hide waiting to be worked. Walking behind the now bound tight prisoner, Kai lifted the back of Nez's thin hair to expose his scalp. "Come here, lad. He can't harm you, trust me," Kai instructed Jilu. "Look, I told you. I was correct in my assumption." Branded on the back of Nez's head was a letter Q. Kai pulled his sword from his wretched wound and then went to the back of Nez. He took the blade and scored a line through the Q on his head. Nez started bucking and convulsing with a frantic scream, echoing throughout the countryside. All that could be heard was the piercing shrieks from Nez. Jilu could barely stand it. He grasped the side of his head to stifle the blood-curdling sound. Without warning, a swift blow from behind unceremoniously decapitated Nez. Kai's expert swordsmanship left the head lying its side in a pool of blood from Nez's previous murder. Picking up the head, Kai proceeded to punt it into the distance. Must have travelled 70 feet and fell with a splat in the grass. Kai and Julie walked back to the pond where he drew the water from earlier, all the while dribbling Nez's severed head along the ground. As they reached the water's edge, Kai picked the head up once more. This time it tumbled into the water, and muffled, bubbling growls could be heard as it slowly sunk into the depths. "Let's see you march to Seeper now, you headless bastard," muttered Kai, with a victorious smile on his face.